we can have Q&A, we can have a conversation about anything that you want, as long as it's somehow Buddhist related. So I don't have any preconceived things to talk about this evening. So the way we do it, if you look under reactions, there is a hand emoji. And if you have a question, you can raise your hand, and then I'll ask you to unmute, and then we can have a conversation. Okay. So, Peter, your hand is up. How can I help you, sir? Peter da Costa? You got your hand up?
Okay, right. Sorry. Yeah. Am I coming through? Great.
You are, yeah.
I just want to say what a smashing idea the breakout room was. I was mentioning to I hope, being dyslexic, I've forgotten his name. I hope he's not offended. Anyway, I thoroughly enjoyed sharing with the others how it corresponded to my earliest experiences at Hampstead. At the end of a sitting, we'd all go downstairs into the basement for a cup of tea and a biscuit, and we'd all sit around and chat. That's exactly what.
That's good. So for people who don't know, Hampstead was where the Venerable Kapilawado had his group when he returned from Thailand, I believe. Is that correct? And Alan James, the founder of the House of Inner Tranquility, met the Venerable Kapilawado, who was his teacher, and stayed at Hampstead, I believe. So great! I'm really glad that we're able to do this. Obviously, there are people from far and wide who are able to join us on an online version of our Sangha. Nothing beats coming to the centre, but the chance, nonetheless, to be able to converse and share the Dhamma is a really good thing. Did you have a Dhamma-related question, Peter?
Well, lineage related, it was so nice to see in one form or another how the tradition has continued on and is still alive and operating today. It was a lovely feeling.
Good.
No, that's not Mama, but it can't be too far off.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Peter. Lucy, you have your hand up. Either Lucy or Lynn, you're together, I see, in Sweden.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, my question is, how important is it to note the aggregates compared with noting the 3 marks of existence?
Right. So the brief answer to that is, well, they are of equal merit and worth and value, because it's through firstly becoming aware of what the aggregates are in terms of our experience, seeing the difference between the conventional way of looking at the world and looking at the world in terms of aggregates. Looking at the aggregates is then the entry point for being able to observe transience, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self. So the one leads to the other. So in terms of mindful noting, it's first distinguishing aggregates, materiality, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. And it is through the process of mindfully noting those components that it starts to become unavoidably obvious that they never last. So you see in experience that they are indeed transient. And because you see that they are transient, you are able to note that they're transient. So over time, what happens is the emphasis goes from locating and noting aggregates to the observation and noting of transience. So at one stage, it might be the feeling, the pain, which is the most obvious aspect. But in the end, you're really focusing in on the transient nature of the object, and what the object is becomes less important. But it only becomes less important after you've gone through the process of really mapping out and really comprehending what the aggregates are in the first place. Does that answer?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Yeah. So the video is a lot, for some reason on my computer, the video is delayed a lot. So I can't actually see your reactions until quite a while later, which is odd. But yeah, that's the answer. Was there a follow-up with that?
No, no, you answered it. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Okay. Robert James, hello.
Hello, Paul. Hello, everyone. Yes, this won't mean much to people who weren't at Mason's Lane on Wednesday night, just gone. But my question is, and unless they've seen the video of it, if I don't know if that exists yet, but you were talking about changing our narrative on our daily life practice. And you based some of that approach on the Dr. or Professor Huberman's video. He's at Stanford University, where he said, and you also seem to say this, that we've got to try and or be positive about the things we don't like during the course of the day. And you mentioned something like running up Mason's Lane or something, or doing chores which we don't enjoy. How do I do that? Because, you know,
So did you say how do I do that, or why do I do that?
No, how? What's the trick of feeling positive and enjoying, I think, was also the suggestion, enjoying and being positive about things that most of us find onerous every day.
Okay.
What do we do?
All right.
What's the trick?
All right. Let me take you through it. So what we're involved with here, if you're the sort of person for whom following a spiritual way, a spiritual discipline, represents the best version of yourself, then what we're doing right now would constitute that acted out. So that overarching aspiration is being acted out right now by all of us, because we place such value and importance on the challenge of following a spiritual way. And we need all the help we can get, because it's difficult. It's a very hard thing to do. Okay. If for a moment we use the analogy of running, somebody goes running because they see value in what it will give them. They'll lose weight. They'll get the endorphins, the chemicals in the body being released and produced through the run. What we tend to do, or what a lot of people do, and this is what Professor Huberman or Dr. Huberman was saying, was that what we do is we tend to take the value of the action only in terms of what it gives us subsequent to the action. So it's not the run itself that is the joyous, valuable thing. It is what the run will give us. So there is the reward after the action, not the action itself. And what that does is it delays the delivery of dopamine in the body. And what is dopamine? They call it the reward chemical. What does it do? It gives us a sense of fulfillment. It gives us energy. It gives us focus. And so what he was saying in terms of running is, by learning, or the act of changing the narrative when the run starts to get hard, instead of going, oh no, I just want to get to the end and I'll have a cup of coffee and a donut, that's actually making the run harder. If instead you say, this pain is valuable because of the overarching, you wouldn't perhaps narrate it quite like this, but the overarching aim includes challenge, it includes friction, it includes difficulties, it includes sweat and toil. And I am doing that now, and that is the best version of myself. I am doing the best version of myself right now. And the personal example I gave was watching that video and then going, right, I'm going to clean the windows, because that's something that I had been meaning to do and I hadn't done. And I said, right, the challenge, the not wanting to do it is because it's challenging physically. And, I think it's a little bit laborious and I can't see, I see the effect. Rakesh, could you put you mute yourself? Thank you. And so I went about the cleaning of the windows, but taking reward, taking value, taking enjoyment and joy in the actual act of cleaning the windows. And lo and behold, I got a sense of fulfillment, energy, and focus. And I completed the task. Not only did I get the reward from the dopamine in terms of doing the task, I also got the reward having done the task of having a clean window or clean windows. And so I demonstrated that it was indeed the case. And it's changing the narrative. When we change the narrative, our reality changes. And the point I was making was, you can bring that into all aspects of your spiritual life and your spiritual discipline. It is a discipline. It is challenging. It is hard. It's hard for somebody to keep coming on a Wednesday night. But it is the best version of yourself. It's hard to say, right, I've had a long day at work. I've got to have something to eat. So I've got to let the dinner settle. And then I can either sit and watch TV or I can meditate. Which is the harder, more challenging, more valuable course of action? It's to meditate. And you can take joy in the act of meditating. You can take joy in the act of noting a hindrance. You can find value in what you've just done or you are doing. And you can remark upon that to yourself. By noting this hindrance, I've just been wishing my neighbor dead. And I take joy in the fact that I've noticed that. And as part of the meditation, because that noting that, doing that act is me being my very best self, the very best version of myself. And so there is a release there is a sense of fulfillment. And anyone knows who actually meditates in that way, where they're not daunted with hindrances. They don't think, oh, this is terrible. If only this was easier. But instead, take joy in the difficulty and the challenge and the friction of it. Then you will get a different set of results. So that was that. Robert, I hope that I've been able to.
Yes. Okay. Well, I think it's going to take. I think it's going to take some persistent work for me to turn the line around.
Can I ask this? Does doing some persistent work to change this round for you, does that represent you being the best version of you?
I think so.
Well, the alternative is to not do that, isn't it?
Yes.
Would that represent the best version of you?
Sorry, I've got a bit. I've lost the plot. Sorry.
What is your overarching aspiration? Why are you here? Why are we talking to each other?
Well, it sounds a bit grandiose, but I suppose I would like to make considerable progress on the spiritual path.
And you consider being here this evening to be in accordance, in alignment with that overarching aspiration.
Yes.
So how does that make you feel? I can't hear you. Sorry, have you put your Robert? Have you put your?
No, I don't really know how it makes me feel.
Does it make you feel awful?
No, I maybe felt a bit confused.
Well, okay. Yeah, maybe it'll take time. Maybe somebody else has got a view on it. But at least at least I've been able to recap what I was saying on Wednesday. Thanks, Robert.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Rakesh, you have your hand up.
Hi, Paul. Yeah, thank you. And thank you also for that answer that you've just given to Robert, which I found personally very helpful. It's quite a specific question, which, just wanted your view on a particular precept and how it's translated. So it's kamesu michachara, which more often than not, it's translated as sexual misconduct, but sometimes it's translated as something like excessive sensuality. And I was wondering, is it meant to be more wide? Is it meant to be wider than sexual misconduct? Is it, for example, meant to also include things like overeating?
Not the third precept. I mean, moderation in eating is a recommended aspect of the discipline, because it affects our ability to meditate. I mean, recently I've been experimenting with intermittent fasting, so essentially not eating after my evening meal until lunchtime the next day. And although I don't do it every day at the moment, I do find on the days when I persist with it, it has a beneficial effect on my meditation. I also, going back to the previous question, must admit that I do reflect on this added discipline as being another version of my very best self. Therefore, I get something of a sense of reward and fulfillment through that extra moderation, shall we call it.
Mm-hmm.
But the 5 precepts, as far as my take on it, has always been that they are 5 inefficient courses of bodily action and verbal action that constitute causing harm to others, to ourselves, and to both. So in terms of the third precept on sexual misconduct, it is, I consider that to be concerned only with those aspects of sexual behavior which cause harm to oneself, to others, and to both. And and there might be more subtle aspects of that. I don't think we should go too far down that road, but there might be more subtle aspects of it as you get your mindfulness increases and awareness of action and result increases in terms of moderating your behavior. But essentially, for me, certainly in the course of my training and my discipline, that's what it's consisted of. Is that helpful, Rakesh?
No, thank you. No, that's a very clear response, because it's quite a direct response to my specific question. And at the same time, you're saying that yes, moderation of eating is definitely nonetheless something that is recommended and endorsed within the teaching, of course. Yeah, no, thank you.
Yes, yeah, and yeah, okay. Has anything else they'd like to talk about this evening? Rakesh, you got your hand up. Was there something else, or is that?
Sorry, no, I forgot. I'll take my hand off. Apologies.
Okay, thanks.
I think Annie had her hand up. I'm not sure if Annie's got a question.
Annie, do you have a question?
Thank you. Can you hear me, Paul?
I can, yes.
Oh, okay. Right. I don't really know how to frame this. Right. Apropos resentment, I'm coming from a Christian background. I'm particularly conscious of this thing of self-denial, martyrdom, self-sacrifice, and I'm afraid, yeah. So that's something I've really not. I'm uncomfortable with, but I'm also. You talk about the spiritual path. I mean, whilst one's meditating, yes, I find being in the physical world generally really difficult, and being practical really difficult. And what's all the time coming up, if I'm embracing, jobs that I have to do that I don't want to do, it would be resentment, big time. And that to me represents my unwise, unhealthy self. So I'm all the time wanting to not feel that feeling. So that's the problem, really, Paul.
That's
and I'm not a young person.
The not wanting to feel resentment amplifies the resentment, or it amplifies the experience of resentment. If we look at it in terms of the Four Noble Truths, the first noble truth is that life is suffering, that there are challenges, that we are put upon. This is the human realm, and it's like this. And we perhaps, through our lives, before we reach a teaching such as Buddha-Dhamma, we may very well develop negative connotations with those challenges and the friction of life. So we become habituated towards reactions like resentment. So the second noble truth is that passionately craving life to be different in the moment amplifies the first noble truth and perpetuates, magnifies the suffering. So there's one form of suffering which is there, and then we magnify it, amplify it, and create the potential for similar future experiences by passionately resisting what we find. So the Buddha's teaching is saying, well, you can actually overcome all of that through the development of wisdom, through the development of seeing clearly what's really actually going on. And so then we come to the fourth noble truth, which is, well, how do you do that? So you develop an ethical way of life, which is always under review, and there are always more subtle aspects to it. But that willingness to live by precepts and to generate positive qualities such as generosity and kindness and service to others help to ameliorate a lot of that resentment. We practice meditation to calm the mind, to learn all about resentment and how to let go of the intense value that we place upon it. And through experience and plenty of practice, we learn that the best approach is to allow that resentment to be there, not to seek its removal, not to try to solve the problem of resentment, but to pay close attention to it. And that's how we develop the wisdom. The wisdom is seeing that the resentment is not me, it's not mine, it's not myself, it does not represent how I actually see life. It is just a temporary, transient mental state that if I pay attention to it, devalue it through not trying to get rid of it, but pay attention to it, it passes away without having been resolved. Because if you try to resolve it, you recreate it, and we're back in that unfortunate loop of magnifying, amplifying the resentment. It's counterintuitive in the worldly sense, but in terms of the spiritual path and the spiritual discipline, it is entirely intuitive. That is how you release yourself from the grip of resentment. Now, there are definitely things you can do in terms of narrative that help that process. And the previous question, Robert, could you put yourself on mute, please? And the previous question was all about that too. Hi, Robert, could you put yourself on mute, please? Oh, you have. Sorry, I'm a bit delayed. So changing the narrative to something that enables you to allow for that resentment. So, for instance, seeing the resentment in terms of being able to recognize it, to be mindful of it, and learning to just live with the discomfort, to observe it and watch it as it passes away. My willingness to do that is a sign that I am in alignment with my highest values and my highest aspirations, which is to be free of suffering. That kind of narrative approach, when you discover resentment, will enable you, I won't go so far as to take joy in it, but you are embracing the spiritual discipline when you do that. And that is in alignment with your highest aspirations, your best version of yourself. And there is a kick you get from that, a very healthy, positive sense of yourself, that even though you're confronted with this apparently very difficult quality, nonetheless, it is actually a stepping stone. In dealing with it, it is a stepping stone to your eventual enlightenment. So it's changing your relationship with resentment from one of trying to get rid of it to one of accepting that it's there. And over time, the more you do that, over time, because you're devaluing the resentment, each time you do that, you devalue, you're saying that resentment is not as important as it used to be to me. And when you reach the point where resentment is no longer important to you, it can be there. And it doesn't stay for very long because you're not invested in it. It takes time. And of course, there are other things you can do, like the development of loving kindness, the development of compassion, sympathetic joy also, and equanimity. But in principle, it's learning not to take the resentment so seriously, essentially. Did you have any follow-up to that, Annie? Is there anything?
Not really, no. I think I'm extremely keen to eradicate the notion of martyrdom, and you might say, well, that's a very different thing, and I hope you would say that's a very different thing. You know, being a martyr. I think that probably is a very different thing, isn't it? I really,
well, if you've been conditioned in that way, you can recondition yourself. But what it's dependent upon, that reconditioning is dependent on that perception of martyrdom being there.
They seem very different concepts, actually. I mean, they really do. Resentment is resentment, isn't it? Martyring is that you're actually embracing, you're like choosing to actually, you're choosing suffering, aren't you? You know, in a way, for something better.
Yes, I mean, because there is that element, and I wouldn't call it martyrdom because it has so many connotations, but there is that element in the development of what in Buddhism we call the parami, generosity. Generosity means that for the sake of somebody else, you're willing to have less of whatever it happens to be. Being of service to someone really means being willing to undergo the challenge, the friction, the difficulty, the discomfort of acting on for somebody else's sake, for their happiness and welfare. So there undoubtedly is an element to it in the spiritual training, but I think probably the first thing to do is to recognize that you don't have to call it martyrdom.
No.
You know, you could call it service, compassionate service to others. Does that seem a bit nicer?
No, I know what's crying out in my mind now. It's this idea of this whole money thing, but I don't want to hog the scene here. One of the things also I was brought up with was the idea of generosity, and that's in all terms, you know, monetary as well. And I haven't really looked after that side of my life, so but that's kind of, I don't want to take up any more time really. So I think maybe another time I'll deal with that.
Okay, nice speaking to you, Annie.
Thank you, Paul.
Dave McGill, you have your hand up.
Hi, I was wondering how you would incorporate metta into your daily practice during meditation. Would it be, you know, I know it's quite a basic question, but would you start off the meditation with it, or because sometimes we've spoken about it, but I'd be interested to know what you think about that, or just give me some advice.
Yeah, I think little and often, I think it is an incredibly good way to begin a meditation, because it does produce a sense of well-being, a sense of contentment with what is. It does help with focus. I don't know in sort of neurochemical terms whether it actually does produce dopamine, but there is a sense of it having its own reward. You don't. This is a really important thing. I was talking to someone recently who was struggling with getting metta going, and we discovered through the conversation that the problem was that they felt that they had to have the feeling in order to do the metta. So they had to feel loving in order to do the metta, and you don't. We did talk about horses and carts and which way around they should go. The idea is to do the metta to get the feeling, not the other way around. So you do not have to be all loved up in order to do metta. You just have to be alive and awake and willing and happy and look forward to it. And you don't have to do it for very long. And you don't have to do it in the most ideal way. You can do it in a really roughshod way, because what we need to do is get it going. We need to get it going so that we get experiential evidence that it's a really good thing to do. So the more we do it and the more we realize it's a good thing to do, the more we want to do it. So for instance, you could begin not with the personal, but the impersonal. May all beings, that's pretty impersonal. May all beings. It's not, we're not getting terribly specific here, are we? May all beings be well and happy, whether they're near or far, large or small, seen or unseen, whether they're human or non-human. That's pretty general. Whether they have 2 legs, 4 legs, 6 legs, many legs, or no legs at all, may they be well and happy. Whether they fly in the air, swim in the water, walk on the ground, or burrow underground, may they be well and happy. May all beings in the north be well and happy. May all beings in the south be well and happy. May all beings in the east be well and happy. May all beings in the west be well and happy. I'm getting a dopamine hit right now. May all beings above and may all beings below be well and happy. Done it. That's metta done. For this meditation, how long did that take? A minute?
Yeah.
That's how you do it. And you go, right. Then you get another happy feeling, because you've just acted in the very best version of yourself. What's not to love about that?
Yeah, no, that's good.
Is that the sort of thing, Dave?
Yeah,
so,
yeah, we've spoken about it those times, but it's kind of like you say.
Keep it short and sweet. Yeah. Keep it very general.
Yeah.
You will still get the benefit of having done something so very efficient. You get it You'll get the benefit from the release of that sense of reward and fulfillment. And then you'll find that as you move into practicing, mindful noting and observation of the breath and dealing with hindrances, that you're dealing with those things from a place of contentment with what is.
Yeah.
So you get so much benefit from it. And you find that your relationships with people around you are benefited also. So
good. Thanks a lot, Paul. That was very helpful.
Great. Thanks, Dave. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to do a spontaneous metta.
Yeah, no, it's good to have that idea of it being quite a simple thing that you can just do at the start of a meditation,
Yes.
rather than being a complicated.
Yes.
process.
People are too idealistic.
Yeah.
It's not how you feel at the beginning of doing the metta, it's how you feel at the end of doing the metta. It's not some fulfilling some idealistic thing of, well, I'm going to do it to my worst enemy and I'm going to make them love me. No. Start from the simplest building blocks. And quite frankly, just stay with those simple building blocks. But what you'll discover is that having done the general, it's then so much easier to then come to specific individuals, because you've created the atmosphere, the mental atmosphere, and then you can start perhaps picking out individuals from there, if you so chose.
Yeah, great. That's really helpful. Thank you very much, Paul.
Thanks, Dave. Rakesh.
Hello there. Hi. Yes, sorry. Me again. It's just a follow-up really from the discussion off the back of the question that Annie raised.
Yeah.
And it just occurred to me that obviously one of the four right efforts being one of the limbs of the Eightfold Path, one aspect of the four right efforts is to dispel any unwholesome states that arise.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to reconcile that with the instruction to stay with the unwholesome state that has arisen until it passes away.
Okay.
Because
Rakesh?
Yes.
Yes. Is resentment permanent or impermanent?
It's impermanent, so it will go if observed at some point. And I'm sensing that's how you reconcile it, is that if you keep observing, you weaken it every time.
What strengthens it?
Sorry?
What strengthens resentment?
Indulging it.
But indulging it is of two kinds. Indulging it meaning just doing the blindly doing the resentment. But there's another indulging, which is
I'm not sure how to answer that.
trying to get rid of it.
Okay. All right.
If you want to keep resentment going, just try and get rid of it. It loves it. It feeds off your resistance. Yeah. So if you combine my answer to that question with the answer to the last question on metta, so you do the metta, even though you don't feel like it, it changes the quality, the atmosphere of the mind in such a way that you feel a contentment with what is. Then memories arise, painful feelings arise upon those memories, and a response of resentment arises as a way of trying to get rid of those painful feelings. You are far more able to do this trick of resting with the resentment, resting with the painful feelings, because you'd previously done the metta. The metta will help tremendously to dispel resentment, but when fresh resentment arises in the mind, you're then in a place where you are far more likely to be able to rest and sit with it, and therefore gain the wisdom that resentment and the painful feelings that come with the resentment are transient. And that's how you begin to then whittle it away, which is pretty comprehensive, I think. And in none of it have we solved the source of the resentment. We haven't, because if we try to resolve the problem, that doesn't mean that if there is a practical solution that you wouldn't undertake it. I don't mean that. What I mean is that there is no attempt to resolve the problem of resentment in that moment.
Mhm.
And yet it's resolved.
Okay.
Does that sound like a pretty good tactic?
No, it all made very good sense. Thank you.
Yeah. And that, I would say, that is the essence of the 4 right efforts.
Mm. Yeah, it's a new way now for me. Yeah, I'm glad, because this is a new way for me of understanding the 4 right efforts.
Yeah. In all of this, our understanding of what the path is and how to undertake it is under review. You don't reach a point where, like with keeping the precepts, I always say that keeping the precepts is a very organic process. It's like, to begin with, as long as you're not killing people, as long as you're keeping the path is very wide. Buddhism is very allowing of people's foibles, of people's unwholesome behavior, and just as long as you keep generally to the precepts, you'll find if you go to the edges of that very wide road, you'll find that what lies beyond the edge is an abyss. You don't want to go there. As your mindfulness improves, as your understanding of what's actually unfolding in your experience improves, you get a sense of the kind of results that come from the kinds of actions that you perform. You get a knowledge of action and result in experience. That naturally narrows the ethical nature of the path for you. So you haven't just got one model of ethical living. It's under review. It changes with time, and as your mindfulness improves and your wisdom becomes deeper, you see that there are more subtle actions that you perform that create painful feelings, and you don't want them. So you change the way that you behave, to the point where your behavior becomes such that other people don't even know that you're behaving inefficiently or unskillfully, but you do. And it creates, even the most subtle sort of loss of wrong speech, even when it wasn't intentional, leaves a little stain in the mind, and you don't like it. And so your mindfulness is such that you see it and you go, well, okay, well, I'll adapt my past behavior. So all of this is under review. All of this is, it's a fluid, the path is in flux all the time, because you bringing new understanding to it. And the learning never ends. Even at the conclusion of the insight path, the Vipassana path, the learning doesn't end. And in fact, the learning becomes an absolute joy. It's like, well, that you realize there is just this infinite playground in which to learn about how life works. It's quite extraordinary. Right. Has anyone got anything else they'd like to talk about this evening? Would like any clarification on what we've talked about? Wow. Okay. It's been lovely to see you. So glad that we've been able to get the online Sangha, the online community, back up and running. I am available if you'd like an interview in person or via telephone, or like this via Zoom or Skype or whatever it happens to be. You're very welcome to book a one-on-one chat. Other than that, I think we're there.
Thank you, Paul.
Oh, Roland.
I've been here the whole time.
You've been here the whole time. I have seen your name. Yeah.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Hope some of
Paul.
that was helpful.
Thanks,
Thank
Paul.
you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
Bye.
Have a good week, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul.